Every child, I mean, at least every child that I know, including myself when I was a kid in public school, we've all asked the question, why do I have to learn this? It's a simple question. Why do I have to learn this? What's the point? And I think everybody, at least most people, they have like an intuitive voice that they've pushed away and kind of suppressed over so many years of being raised in this system. And I think that when you sit down and you have these conversations with them, you are reconnecting with that little voice inside them that used to always ask why, but nobody actually ever gave the answer to it. And I think that's fundamental.
People need to just think about how children learn best. We learn from people that are passionate about whatever they're interested in. If your children are interested in something, contact somebody who's an expert in that field and invite them over for dinner. We invited this blacksmith over. He spent a good hour here with Devin telling him about things. We all went out as a family and learned a lot. My role in my child's life as an unschooling parent is not as their teacher, and so it's a little bit different for people to kind of around that. However, I'm my child's learning facilitator, so it's my role to bring them as much into their life as possible to learn and grow from based on their interests. So mentorship's hugely important in this path. Yeah. So Devin's learning about blacksmithing right now. My daughter Tiffany is actually really into the band One Direction. Her passion right now, One Direction. Her first book that she ever read was the 278-page biography chapter book of One Direction. And that would all kind of blow people's minds that people think that kids have to go through these prescribed scripts and hoops to learn to read, when my children learned in really unconventional ways, but are completely up to date with up to level, I guess you could say, with other kids their age. So she's really into that. She's into visiting with her friends. She loves animals. She had a pet sitting business for a while. We're raising entrepreneurs living this life, and we're showing our kids that they never have to work for somebody else, ever. We're not raising yes men. We're not raising people that obey as a focus. We're raising people that are passionate about what they do and that they can make money as a side effect of that. So my daughter Tiffany at age 11 had her own pet sitting business, raised money for herself to buy herself a Wii. And my daughter Ivy, who's 8, she's very physical. She took gymnastics. She's really into just being outside and climbing and jumping and leaping, so we facilitate that. And my son Orion, who's 5, was really into the typical, I guess, boy stuff. Devin was never into, but he's into dinosaurs and trucks and those kind of things. So, yeah.
Sound pretty healthy and normal.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah, and it's very true what you say. I mean, but that's the essence of what schooling is. Schooling. The essence of schooling is not individuality. It's not taking it upon yourself to do things. It's conformity. It's obedience, as you said earlier. It's scrambling through this intellectual rat race, trying to get grades so you can appease what? The Department of Education, a handful of bureaucrats who determine what 300 million people should and shouldn't learn. And if you look at the history of education, which I'm sure you have, it's not designed to make the best possible children for society. It's designed to make them only as good as the political and corporate overlords want them to be, in accordance with, like the whole idea that, schooling was funded by, some of the wealthy industrialists because they wanted to create obedient factory workers. I mean, it's all there in the history. Do you know anything about like the history of schooling? Do you have any insights about like where it came from and like what its true intentions kind of have been?
I would recommend a great book by Taylor Gatto called Dumbing Us Down, and it really breaks down the history of education and why schools came to be. In the Prussian, it's based after the Prussian model, and it really is truly, it was designed to make factory workers or to make people fit into the machine. Important process. I think even if you're choosing to send your child to school, it's so important for you to have truly informed consent. No one in our culture is given informed consent when it comes to school. We're sold and spoon-fed the reasoning and the fear-based reasoning of what will happen if we don't send them, but it's all lies. I'm here to tell you that none of it's true, that you do not have to jump through those hoops. Your children will learn what's their sole function, what's their purpose. Then you can make a decision to send your child to school or not. Yeah. I think after reading it, you'd choose not to, for sure. But
yeah, I read his Weapons of Mass Instruction. That one's pretty depressing too.
Yeah. Well, I try not to label things good or bad necessarily, but I'm trying to there to give them information, and because we've never punished them, my kids have never been punished, and because they can trust us as valued sources of information, they believe us when we tell them something. So I know that sounds crazy, but so my kids really turn to us and say, is this healthy? People wouldn't believe it unless they saw it, I think. It sounds crazy, but like, for example, my daughter Tiffany is vegan by choice.
Wow.
And so she'll ask me certain things. Is this healthy? Can you help me read the ingredients? And I'll say, well, I mean, there is artificial colorings in this, and I'll give them information, but I won't try to control their choice. And they make choices that are healthy for their bodies all the time. My son Devin is really passionate about the environment and animals and how they're treated, and he's not vegan, he eats meat, but he's still very much into how the animals are treated. And so food choices, they really believe us and trust us when we give them information. And so we had Oreos last night for a snack watching TV, so but we share about that, I'm only going to have 2 or whatever. And I'm trying to think of other bad choices. Can you give an example?
Yeah.
Looking at food, but like,
well, I don't know. It's actually, you make a really good point. You're not very quick to judge what a good or bad choice is.
They turn to me as a guide in this world, and I give them information to the best of my knowledge, but I also tell them that I don't know the answers to everything. We the internet and other resources all the time. I say, well, I have an opinion about that, but do you guys want to Google?
Yeah.
I'm going to give you the analogy of how it was only 100 years ago that men were told to control their wives, that they were told to beat their wives if dinner wasn't on the table on time, that if women didn't obey the husbands, they needed to be severely punished. So they were in an authoritarian paradigm for a long time, husbands and wives together. And look at how far we've come from that with women's rights and the feminist movement, and so much has happened.
I loved the Christmas time. It was always such a magical experience, and the gifts it was all so exciting, but yeah, I probably wouldn't tell them about Santa Claus, to be honest.
Right.
Yeah, I guess just for the simple fact that it feels like it's a form of deception, albeit a mild.
But it's kind of like the whole basis of how people use God, in religion. It's the same kind of story. And so I won't come out and say, tell them a blatant lie over the years that Santa's coming. I just say, do you guys want to play the Santa game or whatever? And do enjoy it. Like, I ask for information of what they want, and we talk about those things. So they still want the magic of Christmas, and they want to pretend that there's a Santa, even though they they fully are in an awareness that it's Joe and I.
Right. Okay. So I wanted to ask you about, so I have like a few friends and family members who wanted to ask you a couple questions about this, because I have my dad's wife, I guess you could call her, she, ex-wife, so that's a long story. She is considering homeschooling. Yeah, she's considering homeschooling, and I pitched to her the idea of unschooling. From your perspective, do you support like homeschooling? You think that's at least is it decent? What are your opinions on homeschooling?
Well, I think if the child chooses to use a curriculum, that's a whole different thing. I can't support anything where it's going to coerce or punish a child if they don't do it. So it has to do with children's rights again. Some children might choose to use a curriculum and might choose kind of schooly resources. And if the child's choosing that, then I support it. Just like I support school if it's a child's choice. It's a lot different to go to school or do a curriculum at home if it's another person's choice versus being forced or coerced. So I wouldn't even ask me that question. I would ask the children that question, like, how do you feel about doing this curriculum? And how do you feel about homeschooling? Find out. I would recommend to her to talk to them about it and find out what they want to do and fully support that.
That's so empowering, because that's one of the things I kind of forget. Like when I'm talking about this whole unschooling stuff, like I forget that it's not my choice; it's the child's choice, and you really gotta you gotta show them what's out there, whether it's public school or homeschooling or unschooling. You really gotta lay them out, and then they have to kind of navigate their way towards what works best for them. That's something I got to work on, because I just assume I'm going to unschool my kids. Like, yeah, no school for you, but it's kind of like, yeah, I guess you got to give them the choice to do it. That's so important.
Ultimately, they're going to choose to be home to where it feels best, which is freedom and respect. I don't know any child that would choose school to be in that dynamic of the authoritarian paradigm by choice, unless home was worse. That's the only time it would happen, is if your child's choosing school. I would say rethink how your home situation is, because it's like choosing prison over freedom.
Right. Do you have any advice for any parent who's considering unschooling? Any tips?
My advice would be that your children are going to come to this life very naturally. Any work that you need to do is on yourself. You need to take the time to de-school yourself and really see how brainwashed you are to see things in schooly terms, to value only certain things you were brainwashed to value over others. For example, the school subjects, history, math, English, science. People tend to value anything that's schooly subjects over a child's interest that might be like video games or something that is really looked down on. I've learned that my children learn from whatever they're interested in. Devin learned how to read from playing the video game RuneScape. My daughter learned how to read through texting her friends and being on Facebook and being really internally motivated to communicate with people in her life through the written word. I would say to read as much as you can about the history of why schooling came to be, and really take time to heal. This is a healing journey for parents because you're going through this process and seeing what your children have for freedom, and sometimes it really hurts. A lot of parents can't handle it, and a lot of people have the attitude that if I went through it, you need to go through it too. And so if you're forcing your child to go through something because you did, that's not the best place to come from for sure. So it has to do with unbrainwashing yourself, de-schooling yourself. We don't live life broken down into subjects. It's so unnatural. I would never tell my child, this is math, or this is science, or this is English. That's not real life. That's not the real world. We're not doing that right now. I don't do that throughout my daily life as an adult. My children do not need to live that way. However, if you were to break our life down into subjects, just for the sake of understanding, you would see that every day, whatever their interests are, do touch on those things. So no advice for the kids, all advice for the parents. Just start doing your inner work and read and educate yourself about freedom and rights and respect of children.
Yeah, that's actually so important what you say about life not being broken down into subjects. You know, I tweeted out the other day, I said, it's not that you don't like math, it's not that you don't like reading, it's not that you don't like science, it's that you don't like the forced schooling version of math, reading, and science. For example, like, my older brother is an ex-math teacher. He quit last year because he couldn't take it anymore, and he kind of realized that the system is not necessarily beneficial for students, for kids. And he's always never really liked writing very much. He always had writer's block, and he's always loved math. And in quitting his job, he just wrote like a 25-page essay about the problems with schooling, and it's the most eloquent, passionate, well-written thing. It's so well-written. It's so contrary to his past in school, where writing was something he hated. He always had writer's block, but in this case, he writes like a god, and he never runs out of ideas, and he writes this 25-page thing, whereas if it was in school and he had to write a 3-page essay about some topic he hated, he'd probably spend 10 hours and not even be able to complete it. So, and I see so many cases of this where people who grew up hating a subject in school later on in life find out that they love the subject, but in a more relevant, particular way that's applicable to their life and their specific interests. So that's
there lies the damage of school right there. There's no such thing as writing block, it doesn't exist. What was really happening is that he didn't want to be writing what he was being forced to write about. Who the heck would? There's no writer's block, and that's where it comes into to be damaging for the rest of your life. You're stuck with these labels that don't even exist because you're not obeying. It comes down to obedience and compliance. When he was writing about what he wanted to write about, of course it's going to flow. Yeah. Everybody's a writer when they're writing about what they're passionate about. It's such a different experience. And so think of how many kids, including myself, I was labeled really poor at math. I was petrified of math. I was labeled that you are dumb at math, stay away from it. I didn't have any real context in my life to use it in school. You're using everything, writing, reading, and math in an institution completely out of context for your life. Reading, writing, and math are all tools to help us get more of what we want in life. So what human being wouldn't want to learn these things to get more of what they want in life? The only time that's interrupted, this easy, natural flow of learning these things, is when you're in an institution, you're forced to do it against your will, and it's about things you don't want to write about. So, that's an awesome example.
It's so important. Internal motivation, as I've heard you say a million times, is crucial. When you've got that internal motivation, learning is almost effortless. It just happens. You don't have to put all the extra energy into forcing yourself to even begin doing it. You're naturally compelled. It's smooth. It's fluid. It just
And it feels good. It feels good to learn. Learning is supposed to feel good by nature. That's what so much is based on, joy and feeling good. But we're told even with that if it feels good, it's wrong. It's a sin, or it's bad, or so. There's so much that we need to undo to properly live this life. And I'm still on my journey with it. People interview me, and I love definitely educating people, but I'm still in process. There's days where I need to relearn things, or I need to take a step back. And so don't think you need to be some kind of expert at this to live this life. You're always learning and growing, and it's normal to have back steps where you say, ooh, that didn't feel good the way that I talked to my child, or anything like that. So be kind to yourself on this path too.
Yeah, so you mentioned that when your son learned reading by playing a certain video game. Could you tell me a little bit about that? Because that was actually kind of similar to what happened to my younger brother. He didn't learn entirely. He was going to school, but his reading levels jumped through the roof because he was playing a game, and the game had subtitles, and his desire to understand the story in the game is what jump-started his reading levels like through the roof, because he was so desperate to learn how to read so he can understand what was happening in the game. Could you tell me a little bit about like how your son learned to read through gaming?
I mean, I think reading, one thing that people need to hear is that learning to read is easy. It truly is. Just like learning to walk and talk is easy. I mean, babies and toddlers never need walking and talking classes. It's natural and it happens. People argue with me. It's one of the biggest things that I promote that's debated, is that reading is easy. It truly is if your child is surrounded with a written word, and they see you reading yourself, and that reading is a useful tool. In Devin's experience, now I have 2 readers, and one child, Ivy, who's 8, in the process of reading, and it looks really different when you're unschooling. Natural reading and writing is a really different process. So it's a lot longer. They really try to perfect. They add different words to their vocabulary every moment. And so Devin's process was, he was playing the game RuneScape, and he really wanted to acquire more weapons in this game. And so he was seeing the actual weapon with the name next to it, and kind of taking a visual picture of that, of, oh, that's a sword, or that's this. And he slowly built up his vocabulary, and he was really motivated to chat about it with the other people in the game. So these interactive games are so helpful. Just said he picked it up. He said it was really easy, and kids never have to go through what we think they have to go through to learn how to read. That you never need to do workbook pages. You never need to sit and have them trace their letters on that blue-lined paper like we did day in and day out. They never need to do phonics. It will happen as a side effect of living a rich, full life together, surrounded with a written word. However, I will say that it might be shocking to some parents that true natural reading without coercion or force happens anywhere between the ages of 6 or 7 all the way up to the ages of like 14. There's a huge window of readiness. But when your children are reading at that age and at an older age, they completely pick up where any other child that age is at, reading level wise. Like I said, Devin's first books that he read were was it Lord of the Rings? No, it's Harry Potter. So he went from never reading a book in his life to his first book being Harry Potter at the same level of any other child his age would have been reading. So they're not behind. They're not at 11, 12, 13 years old. They're not starting with Dr. Seuss books. No, they'd skip over all of that and start at a different level. So I wouldn't have believed it if you would have told me that was possible, a decade ago. I had to live it and see it and say, wow, this is mind-blowing. All the wasted time in school, jumping through those hoops, and none of it's necessary.
Wow. And you know what they say? They say that a child's mind is a sponge. They say like a child like 2 to 3, 4 years old, they're sponges. And I think that the human mind probably is like a sponge, but not just when you're a kid. I bet your mind is like a sponge into adulthood later in life. But the problem is that when you start going to school and you begin to associate learning with chores, learning with, chasing grades that have no relevance to your life, I think that's when the mind closes off, when it no longer becomes sponge-like, which would explain why your children can learn all these things, even though they didn't go through the system. Because I think the human mind and the power of curiosity is something that's the lubricant for the brain that allows you to absorb and retain information. It's when you want to learn something, and a child, imagine a curious child who's been born into this vibrant world that there's so much to discover, naturally would be compelled to want to understand it more.
Yeah,
It's
I agree
amazing.
completely. I love that you say that. It gets my heart going and with excitement, because I can remember when I was learning about this through living it and research and so forth, that one thing that I've learned in my journey is that children learn from you. I mean, I've heard the played out quote, "Children learn what they live," but nobody really gets it. Nobody really lives it. And one thing I've learned, learning never ends. I model for them how to be in this world. It was important for me. One of the biggest gifts I could give them, passions. I took a pottery class. I'm learning about, I learned about raw food cooking for the last year and a half. I need to keep learning and growing as a human being. And that was exciting. Wow, what else can I do? What else have I wanted to do my whole life, but never had the freedom or time in school to be allowed to do it? So this can be so exciting and healing for any of us, even those of us without kids, to say, ask yourself, lay in bed and say, what do I want to learn about? I mean, right now you're learning about this, and this is passion for you. I can tell. I can feel it from you that this is passionate and exciting for you to learn about. What other sides are there to you that you, as an adult, want to learn about? Have you ever really asked yourself? So I think that is such an important thing, is to show kids that learning feels good and it never ends. It doesn't end because you're 18 years old. I thought, I was so happy. I'm 18, I'm out of school. Yeah. TV, because I don't want to learn. And I mean, that's not our purpose of life. Always be learning and growing until we die. So one of the biggest responsibilities never ends. And so again, kind of to feed back to your question of what can, just because we're calling it unschooling and we're kind of talking about kids, I'm an unschooler. I'm a lifelong learner. My kids get excited about what I'm passionate about. So yeah.
Wow.
Just one
that was, God, it's just so, it really makes you right there, just in terms of excitement and fascination. I mean, it just makes you much enthusiasm, not just in the first 3 to 4 years of our lives before we get our entire lives. Imagine a constant sense of excitement with her about this, and I'll try to explain. She's like, oh yeah, well, what's a kid gonna do if you all day? And I tell her, I'm like, maybe the primary reason for some kids is to just want to plug into TV is because shit they don't want to do. So yeah, no. So when a child's it can depress you. It depresses you. Your life becomes this process of doing a bunch of stuff. So when you get out of school at the end of the day, all you want to do is just turn off your mind, plug in the stimulation of a television. And I argue with my mother. I tell her, I'm like, I bet if kids wouldn't watch half as much TV as they watch nowadays.
They don't. They don't. My kids don't watch a lot of TV, but when they do, it's with intention and purpose. Like Devin likes the Discovery. He's been really inspired by that show. So when they make conscious choices for 3 days visiting a friend, and we were talking about TV and how unschoolers really don't watch it. People are life and they put limits on TV and they set limits. Kids do nothing but if they don't fully trust their freedom yet, so it can be confusing for parents.
Yeah.
Discussion about control and what control does. I don't know if I have access to bring you outside to show you what everyone's building.
Okay, I'll let you know if it cuts off.
Never done this during an interview. Put on the. I can.
Great. I'm like,
now, so
this is awesome.
This is something last night into black. So this is what he does
It's breaking up just a little bit.
Time is he blacksmiths.
Okay, I see it.
What?
Yeah, I see it.
There we go. Anyway, he's been really into that thing, and he's this is his like forge that he built with a fire, and so he was here till midnight last night learning about blacksmithing, which is really empowering for him. I want to show you something he's building if I could run down.
God, he must be so excited about life always.
He really is, and it's inspiring to me to see him into these things. I just want to, I have to run out front here.
It's kind of like when you see like the way that kids get so excited about summer vacation. I mean, that right there indicates how much they hate school. The fact that they're so desperate to get out and they're so excited about summer vacation. It's crazy.
Look at Devin's building this right now. Do you see? Can you see this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see it.
He was inspired by being in Peru. It's this huge structure. He wants to make a mud and cob house. So he has started this all with his bare hands. He's created this. And so kids, it's not true. If given the freedom, kids will do nothing but watch TV.
Breaking up.
When they have free time is when they can really ask themselves what they want to do with their time and freedom. And I could show you examples of how all of my children, let me put on the other camera now, if given the freedom, truly do want to be learning and growing all the time. It wouldn't be realistic to think that all they do is sit down and watch TV. So and I'm not anti-TV. I think we live in a book worshiping culture where books are worshipped over TV, when I think if used properly, TV is an amazing learning tool. Our family has been introduced to so many awesome concepts through television. So coming at it from a technology perspective, because I think technology is awesome, but it really is balance. Having balance and complete your own regulation and true self-regulation is freedom. Wow.
Yeah, that is so cool. Yeah, I mean, I've heard it said before that learning it's dynamic. Like the body is a fundamental component of learning. Like, you know, when we go to school, we sit down and we kind of dead end. Say that the body is one. For some people learn through movement, through physical approach to learning, a more hands-on approach as opposed to just a straightforward memorize and spit out for a grade. So to see your son out there building stuff, interacting, I mean, it's just, and you look at like some of the greatest discoveries, like the Einsteins or the Newtons, who discover these things. There was no school institution to teach them the groundbreaking, paradigm-shifting things that they came up with. I mean, a lot of times, these people who come up with revolutionary ideas, they come up with it while they're daydreaming. They're just sitting down, daydreaming, and that's when the sudden spark of inspiration hits them, and they see the world in a different way that allows them to discover something that helps us all transcend the current paradigm that we're in, which is funny because you're not allowed to daydream in school.
Well, and I think people are afraid of boredom. My kids say, like, I'm bored. They need time to have these down periods and this free time when nothing else is going on to really integrate things they've learned, to integrate new ideas. People are afraid of that stillness, and kids in our culture today don't ever have that. We think boredom's a bad thing, and we try to fill it with so many activities where you know, this quiet time and free time and quote-unquote boredom is a really essential time for learning and growth. So when my kids say I'm bored, I don't rush and panic. Oh my gosh, what can I do to make you not bored? Boredom's a bad thing. I know that boredom is a good thing, and it's just a matter of looking at things differently. And I love what you say about hands-on, you know, methods, being hands-on to learn. And one thing I love about unschooling is that it's a perfectly individualized education, because your children, you know them, you're with them, you're connected with them every day, so you know what types of learners they are. Some kids do learn better from, learn more joyfully, I should say, not better, but more joyfully from books. Some kids learn better through visual stimulation, whether it's video games, TV. You're able to perfectly individualize each person's education and learning process and so forth through living this life. So, yeah. These kids on the leading edge of education and parenting and thought and freedom they're the wayseers, the changers of our future, and it's not always easy for us parents. I look at the pioneers living this life with their kids as being really kind with yourself, because we don't do that in our culture either. You know, we really need to focus on everyone's needs mattering, and in doing so, our kids are raised knowing that everybody's needs matter in any situation, which is really different than living in authority and that power rules and you're bullying your way through life. So that's one of our intentions, living this life as parents.
Right. So I posted on Twitter I was going to interview you, and I asked people if they wanted to ask any questions to you. We got one question here. I'm not sure if it's a serious question. I think he's kind of being sarcastic, but his question is, as someone who's had 13 years of compulsory schooling, what are some of the ways a person can get back in touch with their autonomy?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you have an answer to the question.
I get all kinds of crazy questions. I will make it a serious answer, though. Yeah, just doing what we're talking about, de-schooling yourself. Because, I mean, even talking about, you and I talking about learning how to relearn. It's so important how to just always be learning and growing, and tap into what you're passionate about. Listen to music you love, eat foods you love, do things that make you feel good in life, and in doing so, you're going to know what you need to be learning next. So,
do you have any advice for working moms who are maybe homeschooling or unschooling? Do you have advice for that?
Yeah, I mean, there's unschooling that have one parent, that have, you know, two working parents even. It's finding it, you know, if your children are in somebody else working, and sharing that whoever's providing care really understand this philosophical perspective of partnership, and don't punish your children with this for care providers, partnership dynamics as opposed to authoritarian dynamics. So that would be one thing, is just to do your research. Focus on, do they believe in punishing? How do they handle situations that come up? And just find your beliefs.
Let me ask you, how did your children behave? You know, typically, like 2 or 3 years old, the assumption is that almost always by default. A different experience with them, where they're old enough to, like,
I don't know if it's a different experience. It would be a different perspective and a different focus. I mean, understanding what realistic expectations are, and understanding that a 2-year-old just doesn't sit still. It's not, nor does a 5 or 6-year-old, depending upon the child. So that's why school is so dangerous and damaging, is because you're forcing children to sit still. I think it's focusing on the needs of their behavior. We're so focused on training kids like we're training a dog. It's so unbelievable, the similarity between training and raising a child, and when you see it through those lenses, you see how unjust parenting is in our culture. Children are children. They're going to act like children. We expect 2 and 3 and 4-year-olds to act like adults, and expectation of another human being you could have, and it's cruel. And so to know that these are children, they're human beings, little children, to help them get what they want. I don't want to be a wall between my child and their desires in life. I'm not going to for things. For example, I want to help them get what they want in partnership, and they know if they want something. They were 2 years old, so I'm always in partnership and working with them. And when you shift that, you're not seeing children as not obedient. You're not seeing children as bad or disobeying. You're seeing them as here to help keep safe and guide through life. So it gets really easy when you look at it that way.
Yeah, what if like adult, because we kind of made a distinction earlier, where, you know, children behave like children, that's just the way children are supposed to behave. Adults are supposed to be childlike sometimes too, but because we've been conditioned, you're not supposed to play, you know, you're supposed to be mature, which is part of our conditioning, the way we were raised in the public school. What if being playful and open and curious, as children naturally are, is children, but it's supposed to be a quality of adults too. It just gets and put through the grinder.
Yeah, I'm smiling because you get me during this interview. I was at this weekend. We were in Vermont, and we went. There's these huge inflatable slides that you climb up and slide down, and it says it goes up to 200. And I said, I really want to try it. Like, I want to do this obstacle course. And one thing that we mentioned, to care about what others are thinking of us all the time, that we're really adults sitting over there going to think, or we care more about what other people think of us. We have to realize to please others, how conditioned we were to meet the needs of the adults around us. And then we realize how much we have lost ourselves and how much raise us. Go with that more, because once I did that, a couple other adults get up.
Fear what other people think comes from because you've been conditioned to think that you have to analyze and monitor your own behavior, because what if your parent, what if you form once you get to school? When you get to school, it's like 80 times worse, because now you have in you, and you've got 30 other kids. It's a whole environment of people being regulated, being stifled, and it's pretty ridiculous.
And one of those things that are so important to think about is the way that kind of conditioning is so damaging to our self-esteem and self-worth, because I remember, like, if everybody else approved of me and I got an A and I was a good girl and everybody was okay, I could love myself. And so it wasn't until others told me that I was good that I could then love myself. And so we're really conditioned that way, that to think that we're no good if others themselves. So, that basic human brought us that have got the system all for the gain to meet the needs of the adults in the institution around us. And we need to take that self-love back. It took me loving myself at the top of that inflatable slide to say, who cares? I love what I'm doing. When I look like an idiot tumbling down this thing. And so this is what I mean also, because we don't want our kids. Our kids are not going to have to go through 40 years of healing after going through this now, doing what we're all learning how to do as adults. So I also have a fun family blog where I just post different things our family's up to. It can be helpful to read just to, see somebody living something differently. It's called The Sparkling Martins at blogspot.com. If you type in The Sparkling Martins, you'll find it. It's our family blog. And I also have videos. They're kind of older. They're like 6 years old on YouTube about unschooling. And dozens of interviews out there and TV appearances. Our family was recently on the ABC show Wife Swap. It aired this April. So if you type in Wife Swap, Martin Family Unschooling, you'll get to see. I went to San Diego to live with another family. It was a crazy experience, but it was a learning one. Our kids learned so much about TV production and so forth. And we've also done a number of other things. We have other exciting things coming up, which hopefully people will be interested in. But no, I'm just really happy to do these interviews. This is my passion. It's just talking about this life with people and people that are interested to learn about it.